Good day to all. Welcome to Extreme Recap. Imagine if you suddenly disappeared from sight. After he awoke as a ghost, that is what happened to him. He now needs to figure out what happened to him and try to talk to other people. We begin with a group of people sitting around a dinner table outside of a house. They are exuberant. While Nick's mother is giving a speech, she mentions that Nick's father is single. Nick gets up and walks out of the table. He enters the house, sits on a stool, and points a pistol at his face before proceeding to cut a cake with his face on it. However, not long before he shoots, he awakens. It was each of a fantasy. He is currently with his mother at breakfast. And for a grown man, that breakfast looks funny and makes him smile. His mother, yes. Additionally, she has considered taking him to a London writer's workshop. Additionally, she does not appear to be in favor of it. As a result, he turns his breakfast frown rather than smile. How cute. On his bicycle, he is now on his way to school. We see him participate in a business exchange at school. He did schoolwork for some person. After giving the guy the homework, his sweetheart surprises him, inquiring as to whether he could be coming for involved with tomorrow night. However, he says he can't cause he'll be occupied. After that, two men and a woman attempt to extort money from this man. Clearly, he owes them. He is presented with a knife threat by Annie, the gang's leader. However, all she really does is scratch him on the finger. Now we are in Nick's class, and a man is reading to the class his homework. The brew. To top it all off, Nick, he moves to the front of the glass, gets on the table, and reads his own work. It's great verse, yet his schoolmates appear to be worn completely insane out. As a result, they all pack their belongings and head out when the bell rings. The cafeteria is now full of students. Pete, Nick, the person who crashed, Nick's best friend, is telling Pete that he must defend himself and not allow others to harass him around pizzas, which you cannot. As a result, Nichols fought for his friend. He goes and settles the pizza debt while whispering to Annie. Dude, you are so broken. I had high hopes that he wouldn't be caught. Be that as it may, Annie just gave it a couple of moments, then went after him, handling a few punches all over. Presently, two of them are standing by to see the standard and are having somewhat candid conversation. She tells him that because he sells essays, he is not superior to her. He concedes that he's a faker. Then the chief comes in Sandy home, then he goes to Scratch and advises him to quit squandering his life on lost spirits like Annie Newton. She has no future. He says, you do, don't let us down. What's more, Scratch's just answer is, might I at any point leave now? Then, at that point, we see Annie back home. Her stepmother has not prepared dinner for her brother, so she defies her about it. This causes a contention between her father and stepmom. However, Annie simply heads upstairs to prepare Victor's sandwich. You can see the boys' moon changing over Nick's house, she replied when Victor asked if she would be going out at night. We see Pete show up and prod him about getting beat up by a young lady. Relatable. Now that Pete has inquired about the same party, Nick responds that he won't even be around tomorrow. As part of the writer's program, he will be in London. He's going regardless, even though his mother is unaware. As indicated by him, she tries to control everything and micromanage him all the time, but he won't let her have this one. Presently we see Annie get in a vehicle with her beau, Marcus, and when they get off the rob at a jewelry store, he smashes the glass, grabs some jewelry, and then scurries back to the Mercedes that Mark is just stalling. He also drives away the following morning. Furthermore, he is getting ready for school and is heading out with the bag. Mark has requested that she leave the sack with him, however she declines and says he'll not do anything regarding it. However, he actually takes action. He picks up his phone and dials the police number. Gracious, what a rodent. At the school we see Annie take the pack and put it in her storage. She sees Pete giving her a stare down as she closes her locker. The police arrive a short while later and keep her open longer. Take the jeweler out of the bag by finding her. She gives Marcus the empty after calling Marcus from the station. He inquired as to whether she knew how he found out. She also states that she does and that she will handle it. Are you real? Regardless, after the call, she leaves the station prepared to exact revenge. She's so certain. Send her to the police on Reddit. Pete now appears to be saying goodbye to Nick. The hug in Nichols' house, where his mother has learned about his London ticket. Obviously, the carrier called to say that the hour of his flying has been changed. She brings it up to him. He apologizes and says he tried to talk to her about it, but she says he's had the ticket a week. Therefore, despite what she said, he was going to leave, but she fired. He simply intended to leave without speaking. She claims that she has the impression that she has been living with a stranger. Scratch is currently in his room preparing to leave. He inserts a watch into his pocket. Then, as Pete is walking fairly quickly, a man suddenly appears and punches him out of nowhere. It's Annie's folks. They take him to Annie. She believes it's him, a Redditor out, so she's pummeling him, attempting to inspire him to own up to something he didn't do. He can't bear the torture any longer. According to him, the hotel or the culprit. The boy's best friend is the person you're about to implicate. Nick, but all you need to do is comprehend his reasoning. He's not even close to being a snake. He simply anticipated that Nick would have left the country by this point and that Annie would not have anyone to stomp on. Nick's flight was delayed, which was unfortunate for everyone. As a result, while they are hanging out, he is at the party asking his girl if she wants to go to London. He tells her to have a good time and tosses her their ticket. His mother's brief speech appears to have changed his mind. And he no longer wants to go. That's bad news for everyone, you know. As he is returning home, a car begins to pursue him and pushes him into a ditch. Annie and her boys are there. He is being beaten by them. Now, Pete attempts to justify his actions after getting out of the car, but no one is paying attention. He now picks up Nick and asks him who is broken, to which he still responds. Aren't we all in love with a tough guy? Okay, that might have been incorrect. At any rate, Nuggles' balls are in a couple of additional punches and a hard kick to the face. He is killed by that kick. So they proceed to dump his body in an opening during the cycle. Scratch's watch falls, yet no one notification us. I could pardon Pete previously, yet not currently. How would you consent to being a part of that? Best friend despite growing up in public. He also confesses to Marcus when he returns home. She lets him know she applauded the individual who duped her. Marcus is now asking her why she came to him, and you can see the shock on his face because he is certain that that person was not the one who sold her out. I'm on parole, as you know. Annie, for what reason do you come here? He asked and sends her away. She feels like she has been lied to. Wait until you discover that he was the one who duped you. In his workshop, she shatters a few things. Leaves after giving him an ironic kiss. She then burns her last night's clothes early the following morning. Nick, what we see next will blow your mind. He leaves the wood, looking solid, so perfect and new. He strolls to school, proceeds to sit in class. In any case, listen to this. Nobody can see him. He is, invisible, and relatable. So no one knows he's in class, despite the fact that you sitting not too far off and can hear all that they're saying. They utilize that valuable chance to move a couple of things out into the open about him, even his young lady. She says that he always tries to make himself feel important and is pretentious. You can't confide in these young ladies, man. However, his best friend also lied to him. Actually, bro, don't trust anyone. He initially believes that they are just playing with him, but then he takes it and throws it at a shelf book. Never leaves the table at all. He then calls his mother from the principal's office, where the telephone is located. He is directly in front of his principal, but the principal is unable to see him. John Cena must be this man. He then shouts at his mother. She is unable to hear him, but he can hear her talking to the detectives about him. He is now sprinting home. On his way, he crashes into someone in the school hallway, is struck by a vehicle, and is run over by a truck, but nothing actually happens in real life. When he returns home, he observes detectives frantically searching the house for him. By telling his mother he is dead, he tries to alleviate her suffering. However, obviously, she can't hear him now. He is simply strolling the streets. In addition, I would be doing a lot more than just walking the streets if I discovered that I was invisible. The criminal investigators, Brian and Kate, are gaining ground with their examination. The principal they spoke with informed them that Nick got into a fight with Annie. So they had to go to Annie's house. Brian must have known Annie when she was young because her father was a cop. The rope on the roof asked her about last night's activities. Nick is also present to watch over her lies. However, he also learns that she applauded him because she believed he had ratted her out. He sends her flying off the roof. But that just doesn't work, you know. Annie and a search party are sent to the woods where Nick's body was dumped by the detectives. Peyton advises him to be there. Nick is clearly ill when he hears that. He is now in his room and can see his mother entering and going through his belongings. He is reading along with her as she reads a poem he wrote. He is joined by his pet bird, an invisible paradise. He is carrying it in his hands. Then, after a few seconds, it vanishes. That is a new insight for him. According to he, I'm alive, and he runs directly to where his body was unloaded. He tries to get the search party to find them, but with the humans, he has little success. The canine, notwithstanding, first seemed like he could see Scratch, however he dismissed without a moment to spare. However, the dog assisted in finding Nick's watch. Peter is now reporting to Annie and the other members of the group. He understands they'll before long be found. Therefore, he declares that he will report to the police and warns him that if he does so, he will also be sent to jail. Nick is now sneaking back into her house as she tries to pack up her belongings and escape while he is still there listening to everything. Victor awakens and inquires as to whether she will disappear and never return like mother. That is really sad. Now, Annie is crying. She might be cold, but when it comes to this boy, she's kind. Victor is told by her to never be like her. Great exhortation. She responds, cool, when her father enters the room and tells her to leave. However, she would return and clap for her younger brother in the event of an incident. She departs. Scratch does one of his discourses, once more. Nothing she has done can be excused by telling her about the horrible family dynamics. The woods search gets more intense. We can see choppers and ambulances now. There is still life in a professional-sized naked state. He only has 2 or 3 days. Presently we get a clear line of sight of next body, and we see his fingers jerk. He is indeed alive. Now, Detective Brian goes to talk to Marcus. He inquired as to whether he was with Annie on Tuesday night. He also says, of course, yes. He then inquired if he was with her when she robbed the jewelry store the night before. Furthermore, he said, no, he doesn't know anything about that. Brian doesn't overstate the fact that he knows Marcus has been out on parole for 8 months. He simply hands over his card and tells Marcus to call him if he sees Annie because he wants to talk to her about a student who has gone missing from her school. At last, Brian, sure he tells Marcus that he knows the specific brand of Carla got taken that very evening. The adornment store was ransacked. Nick is now explaining to his mother that he is confident that this will not affect her in any way because she always has everything under control. He yells at her, shakes her, throws everything on her table, and even throws a chair through the window. Naturally, however, none of that actually occurs. His mother gives birth shortly thereafter, and she is crying heavily and yelling. Next name, Pete is going for a stroll under the downpour. At the point when Marcus appears suddenly, gets him and focuses a weapon at his chest, Marcus lets Pete know that he's being trailed by the police and he really is. Pete shows him the location where the body was dumped as he leads him into the woods. The following day, Marcus attempts to deceive Annie to come to an area so he can applaud her, however she thinks something. As a result, she calls Pete and tells him to leave. Instead, Pete leaves, and Detective Kate follows him. After Scratch gave his all to inspire her to awaken and look, Peter's currently the scaffold with the 2 people, while Annie is far away watching. Marcus, on the other hand, appears from behind her and fires a gun at her back. He tells Pete to go home and takes her to the bridge, where the other guys are. He dashes home. He clearly expressed his gratitude at being asked to leave. Marcus is right that they need to move quickly because Pete has a tail, but it's too late now. Already present are the police. Anything takes Marcus's shotgun and aims it at the police, but they are now surrounded. However, Annie is a remarkable survivor. She figures out how to move out in a substitute. While running away, Peter Parker would be extremely proud. Annie, if Nick creams you, they'll catch you. Due to the fact that she turns around and screams. She heard me, Nichols. She goes to a club and sells a ring, which had a place with Marcus, to some person. After he pays her, she chooses to remain back and do a little moving. She now performs the Sooner from White Woman dance after taking off her hoodie and beanie. The following day, she apologizes at her mother's grave while Nick is just watching. Nick then begins to talk about how, due to the amount of pressure she puts on him, he sometimes wishes his father had died. He now touches Annie's shoulder with his hand. He says he realizes she can hear him. As a result, he tells her to tell him how much bigger his body is, while she stands up and walks away. He goes after her. She steals money from Victor by breaking into the school at night and stashing it in her locker in an envelope. Nick is present to inform her that he is terminally ill and has little time left. Ironically, she is the only person who has the power to save his life. She clearly hears his voice in her head, as you can tell. As a result, when he yells her name, she turns around but cannot see anyone. Now, she's miserable. Being a good boy, she goes to get a shower. Nick always avoids looking. Meanwhile, Nick, the person stuck in the hole, has now opened his eyes. Furthermore, he is resting down the ball court. And Nick is standing right next to her, calling to her while he works his hands through her body. He oversleeps, and the basketball team that comes in for practice wakes him up. What's up? A phantom, and over-resting or dozing by any means, so far as that is concerned. Regardless, we now see Annie Nick's house. She's becoming through his old photographs and getting nostalgic. Even Nick is smiling here while his body is decaying in that hole, so don't tell me these two are in love. Fortunately, Nick's mother enters and puts an end to the romance that was developing. Furthermore, he runs out of the house and straight into the forest to where they dumped Scratch's body in. The body is not there, Viola. Annie is being told by Nick that someone was there to move his body, and Nick is asking her to believe he sees the substances she found with Pete a few days ago. That also indicates that Pete was present. As a result, she pursues Pete at school. Pete is currently telling her that Scratch didn't work her out in any case. He then admits that Marcus and he moved the body. She therefore pursues Marcus. In his car, just outside a police station, she ambushes him. She then leads him to a cliff edge and orders him to kneel. Moment of role reversal. Then she focuses a weapon at him. Pete, on the other hand, tries to self-delete. Pete is unable to even hear Nick pleading with him not to. However, here's the wonderful thing: while Peter is in that change zone where he's not dead yet not completely alive, he sees Scratch, they can see and converse with each. Nick is now inquiring about Pete's decision to move the body. Simultaneously, Annie is asking, Imprint is a similar inquiry. After they both respond roughly simultaneously, Pete's parents rush into his room and locate him in the state's end. And Annie simply walks away from Marcus and turns to look for his neck without clapping. Marcus stands up and shoos her, proving that it was a bad idea. However, she doesn't pass on. She has sufficient strength to shoot him, get up, and call Detective Bryant. She lets him know where Scratch is and lets him know she cherishes something for her sibling in her storage, and he ought to ensure Victor gets it. The police rush to the dam, where Nick's body is, immediately. However, Nick arrives naturally ahead of them. He now touches himself as he locates his body. Gracious. Actually no, not in like that. He is now in his body, but he cannot save himself, as you know. Nick is in the water when the dam gates open. Kate tells her that the gates are closing, and the police are now looking for her neck. Brian uncovers him. Everyone rushes there. He is indeed alive. They rush him into the ambulance, with Annie's watching from afar. She continues to bleed. She gets in her car, and there is a kind of black sound for a while. A police officer wakes her up later that evening and asks her to get out of the car. However, she does not and simply drives away. Instead, they begin chasing her at the hospital, as anticipated. The doctors are watching Nick's mother. Annie was finally surrounded by the police, who all have guns aimed at her. However, she can hear Nick saying, "I need you, Annie," in her head. And she only required that as fuel. She steps on the gas pedal and drives through the police bar. She puts this in place, gets out of her car, and walks the rest of the way. Naturally, Nick directs her to the hospital, where his body is undergoing surgery. Nick, she gets there, and Mom goes. The moment she sees her, you get a little nervous. Nick tries to make things right, but Mama can't hear him. As a result, Annie must do everything herself. She says that all she needs to do is talk to Nick. However, Scratch, mother, spears Smack all over, and he then tells her that Scratch is here, that she can feel him and hear him, that she understands what he needs. Obviously, she doesn't trust her. As per Nick's instruction, he also tells Nick's mother about that incident. When she asked Annie what she wanted, she was in his room reading his poems and thinking about how he was with her. Additionally, Annie asserts that all she requires is a view of the neck. His mother says no to her offer of assistance. He also gives her a gun and says that she knows she can get him back. He is now running her fingers through the neck's body as she finally allows her in. She is sorry to him and implores him not to go. She removes the necklace that was once her mother's. While she joins him on the bed and cuddles with him, she places it in his hand. When she does that, the real Nick wakes up and calls Annie's aim, stating that she wanted to do one good deed. The invisible Nick then vanishes. What's more, Scratch tells her she did. She kept it. Annie then taps out. Then, at that point, we see Victor playing with a toy plan, and Scratch appears and has a discussion with him. Victor says his sister passed on, and Scratch says they ought to send her a message. Victor's message is brief and straightforward. Hello, Annie, so Scratch composes that on the plane for himself and they fly it. Moral the story, I don't have the foggiest idea. That was sad, though.